Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. First, some very warm thank yous to Minister Tillerkine and your team, who've been incredible. Without them, we couldn't have made this happen. And we truly sold out over the next few days. We were turning people away. So I greatly look forward to not only to speaking with you about the work ahead, but also to really, the program is incredible, and I hope that those of you here will be able to really attend and learn from each other over the next few days. I'd also like to thank Director General Kim from the Republic of Korea, our current COP president, for being with us today. Also want to acknowledge the presence of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Ms. Hanna Lepoka, and also Stefan Leiner from the European Commission and many other dignitaries who are here. So thank you for joining us. I believe my remarks are meant to sort of set the stage a bit about where we are, not just in the biodiversity world, but also more broadly in terms of international sustainability efforts and where we might be going from here. And don't be scared, some of the slides have lots of text, but I promise I won't be reading from them. So let's see if I can make this work. Okay, so as I think we all know, this year has actually been quite remarkable in terms of what's been happening on the international stage for sustainability. We had the adoption at a summit of the 2030 Agenda with its Sustainable Development Goals in New York. The Desertification Conference of the Parties just happened in Turkey. We've got a major meeting on climate change that some of you have heard about that's coming up soon. There was a major meeting on disasters, and for the first time linking ecosystems to disaster prevention. And of course, it is the midpoint for the 10-year strategic plan for biodiversity. I was working our division in the Secretariat was taking the lead on our work within the Sustainable Development Goals. And I have to say, even though they are soft law, if you will, it's incredible what we achieved as a community. Because biodiversity, I think some people are surprised at how much biodiversity and ecosystems really feature in the Sustainable Development Goals. And I could see the progression politically and in the discourse that people were having around the world at different meetings. And wherever one was from the world, you would hear ministers and others saying biodiversity is essential for sustainable development. It's essential for economic well-being. It's essential for the social aspects of sustainable development. And so I wasn't surprised, although I'm pleased that the Sustainable Development Goals include biodiversity so prominently, not only in their own goals, one on oceans and coasts, but terrestrial ecosystems, but also they're embedded in many key SDGs. So it's not listed here, but Goal 1 on poverty, there's a direct link with biodiversity through Target 15.9, which we discussed recently, on biodiversity and poverty. Goal 2, 6, 12, and others very directly talk about ecosystems and their role. So I think one thing we are thinking about is how can we take advantage of this political platform. This is going to be an agenda for 15 years in the United Nations General Assembly, and we've already started to form partnerships and think about next steps with entities such as the Global Compact, which sits in New York, with key countries that are in New York, with key NGOs and others. So this is a major stage we need to make use of. There are, of course, many linkages of biodiversity to these other international discussions. Now, the fact is, because of human nature and the history of these different instruments, they have grown up in a bit of a siloed fashion. For businesses, however, they're faced with all of this plethora of different international words and forums, and I think this is a place where businesses actually can bring things together, because they can see, well, wait a minute, how could biodiversity be more integrated in my corporate planning with climate change aspects and others? So this is a key, I think, for us to think about. How can businesses actually better integrate biodiversity across these different discussions? I think many of you are familiar with sort of our roadmap, if you will, which is the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity, which is really the key because it was laying out not only for the CBD, the Biodiversity Convention, but it's been recognized as a UN strategic plan. So this is something that everyone can contribute to, and we are working with, in numerous partners to do so. Now, business is key to this. One of the sort of founding philosophies, if you will, approaches of this strategic plan was that we could not achieve the goals of the Biodiversity Convention by just putting a fence around a green space and through conservation. We had to address both through strategic goal A, which is the indirect drivers, such as perverse incentives, financial issues, etc., and strategic goal B in particular, which is about direct drivers on biodiversity loss. Businesses play a key role in both of those areas. The strategic plan has 20 specific targets, and I won't go through these, but there are some of the key ones for the business community are those listed here. Target 2 and 3 and 4 in particular. 4 is probably the most directly applicable about the need to consume resources in a way that's within safe ecological limits. Now, we recently had a midterm review scientific assessment of the strategic plan, and the news was not great, as you might expect. The overall conclusion is there is progress. There's a lot of good stories to tell, but not sufficient. The rate is not sufficient for us to project right now that we will achieve the strategic plan. Again, you're going to see a lot of data now. I'm just going to point out a couple of elements, but this sort of dashboard is a simple way of showing, are we going backwards, if you will? Are we surpassing the targets, or is there no progress, or maybe insufficient data? So some of the keys you'll see, most of these are not on track. There's one or two that are on track, or in one case surpass the projected time frame. But this is not a great story, and especially if you look at some of the lines that are flat on subsidies, perverse incentives, target 4, about safe ecological limits, we're not doing that well. So again, I won't go through these greatly, but this is all online and a helpful kind of cheat sheet in terms of how we're doing globally. Now, some key messages from the Global Biodiversity Outlook were that we are on track, as I say, where we're making progress, but we have a lot more to do. And probably the most important message is the last point about mainstreaming. And that is, what can we do, in particular with the business community? I like the remark of the minister of how do we change our language into business language so that businesses see why this makes sense. Now, we need your help. I want to talk just for a second about what's coming up here. Let me go back a slide. We have a couple of major meetings that are coming up now. The first is our Conference of the Parties in Korea created a new subsidiary body of the CBD, much like what's in the Climate Treaty, which is called the Subsidiary Body on Implementation. And the mandate is actually quite rigorous. It says that we're supposed to be looking at how are countries doing at the national level to implement their commitments under the CBD, and what can we do to help parties to overcome any obstacles to doing so. So there's an expectation that we're actually going to try to take a look at, I don't want to say putting more teeth into it, but looking in a much more serious way at what is needed concretely, what actions can be taken. So we're looking at that now, and this is, of course, in the lead up to COP13, which will be in Mexico. And Mexico has been a terrific partner in terms of this next phase of our work, which is really focused on mainstreaming. We're looking at 4 key sectors, including agriculture, fisheries, forests, and tourism. And we're also looking at cross-sectoral policies that need to be addressed at the national level, as well as within cities and other levels of decision makers to actually make a difference. The CBD is looked at as like a framework convention, and I've had lots of discussions with governments about, what do we need to do to make this actually matter more to countries and have ownership. The key to that, in terms of the national level entry point, is the national plan, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. So this is one place that we can work to make linkages with businesses, with key sectors for development and economic growth in countries, but also to hold some accountability in terms of what commitments there are. So my last point to you is really the bottom point here, which is there has been a lot of progress, but we need your help. And I would really welcome this week, I'd like your ideas. We need help in terms of what I've just mentioned. What can we bring to COP13? What actions can be committed to, whether through the political discussions or in voluntary pledges at our meeting? We're going to make space for that. We're going to have space for a lot of press conferences for ministers to make commitments, for non-governmental entities, businesses to make such commitments. But what would actually make a difference to change the equation, to actually get businesses more on board with biodiversity, and whether it's communication, rule of law, or accounting practices, etc. And the last thing I'll say is the Secretariat, I want to thank my team, David Stuerman and Christina Newman, and I just have to mention, we do this on a shoestring. We operate this program that you're participating in from our side with voluntary budgets that we're honestly right now just scraping together. And the global partnership is something that we're going to have a big discussion about this week. How can we make it more effective? We provide the Secretariat, but you all, many of you are part of that, and I look forward to those discussions as well, because we can't do this alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thanks once again for the great cooperation we had in organizing this conference. So now the Business and Biodiversity Forum is opened, so let us thank all the speakers once again with a big applause.